It's an amazing experience, and there have been photographers before me who link the process of making work and psychotherapy, I suppose, or analysis, self-analysis, which is a sort of ridiculous statement.
So would you then use the image, would you revisit it once the image is made? As a kind of tool to revisit and explore?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. No, I feel like I've done that. I've confronted. There's lots of fears being confronted in all the images, even in the construction of the images. A huge amount of fear involved, and a lot of work.
Fear of what?
Well, just physically being there, naked, as you mentioned earlier. That there's a lot. I have to confront a lot of fear to do that. To own the image when I ask someone else to press the button, that is a fear in itself. You know, am I the maker of the image because did I press the button or not? That all these things come into and integrating the text into the image, which has been very important for me to get right, and you know, sharing that with my peers and my lecturers and working through, you know, what am I really saying? I mean, it's that difficulty in communication. You know, I find that my lot in life is to be able to communicate through the image, and I'm blessed really by having that ability. But I've always struggled verbally to express my feelings and views, and I think, you know, being able to try and communicate through a picture, which is quite ambiguous and very personal, you know, it's still very difficult. But if I feel it's right, that's all as an artist one can do, and hope that it creates some resonance with somebody else. But that's not important, that's of secondary value.
So what exactly is the relationship between the text and the image? Because you mentioned the text.
Yeah, well, it's going to sound a bit of a cop-out, but effectively that's an ongoing process. I'm still working on the series, you know, and I'm experimenting with the relationship between the text, what I feel I have to say, and how that involves itself with the image. So in a literal sense, that's an ongoing process. But the text comes from the underlying reason behind the text is, as a kid, I didn't enjoy reading books. But what I did enjoy doing is taking books of the time and looking at the pictures, and under the pictures there would always be a caption. I'm not sure intellectually why that had to be the case, but almost in all the books I had there was always a caption, and so I could, in a book of 150 pages, I could flick through and I could find the 12 illustrations that were juxtaposed through the book, and I could read the captions, and I could form, even if it would have been relatively accurate appraisal of the story, but I can actually form my own feelings of the story by doing that. And I think that's where my work comes from. It's a question of trying to take an incident and then encapsulating it into a caption. Now I know it's very difficult, or it has been very difficult for me, because there's almost an obsession with being too obvious with art, and how important it is to be very ambiguous. It's almost a way of allowing more people in. And I do appreciate that, and there's been a constant battle within me of how obvious I should be about the incident, and also how the text has changed when I look at the series lined up. You know, I'm up to probably 5 or 6 images now, and I'll probably continue to work on this project for another year or so. And it's important how the image changes as I line up or change the order of the story, how the text works as a whole, you know, as well. So. As you know, it's a bit of a cop-out, but I am still working on this, and it comes from my. I always felt as if I wasn't a very good reader, and my English was quite poor, and I think it feeds into that vulnerability, that sense of communication again, of being able to communicate and wanting to shout. You know, it's almost it's a question of wanting to shout, but without being too obvious about it. It's quite a dilemma I'm finding myself in, but something I'm quite passionate about getting right from myself.
And it's interesting because obviously that this work is very personal, and you spoke about your own vulnerability and your fears, and I'm wondering how it feels to make work, to put it on the wall, such personal work.
It's true that it's not art until you put it on a wall. You know, it could be just a very self-indulgent piece of personal work. When you put it on the wall, you're inviting others to embrace it or not. It's a strange thing. To answer your question in a simple yes/no, it hasn't been a problem. I think there's a sense that I felt quite courageous doing it, and I think other people have said this. You're quite brave to put that image on the wall. So there's a sense of, yeah, it's a difficult question to ask.
You mentioned earlier that it was important that it felt right for you, and you hoped that people resonated, but really it wasn't that important. I'm wondering how important it really is.
It is important to communicate something to the world. I often worry that it's a bit victim-y, you know, and it's coming from a place of victim. But once I move through this series, I'm working on a new series now, for instance, which is less so. So it's almost as if, you know, the process of doing the childhood memories sort of angle has allowed me to put that to rest. But to answer the question, it's still, recognition isn't that important to me. I think I just want to be heard. You know, I'd like people to say, "I hear you, Spencer." You know, I don't want people to say, "I hear you and I feel really sorry for you," which I think probably the series is, you know, the area is going a little bit like that. But it would be great just for people to say, "I hear you, Spencer," and leave it at that.
You're talking a lot about self-indulgence and maybe the work being narcissistic, but what I recognised was that it resonated, that something about what you had exposed also touched something about how they felt inside, and that must give you a lot of satisfaction.
It does, yeah, and surprise, actually, because of course, you know, we all have different upbringings, and we all value or you know, however we feel about our past, or whether indeed it bears any relevance to the present. But I personally believe our past do bear a lot of relevance to the present, and I think if I get in touch with feelings, I don't think you have to experience the same experience or even part of the same experience. I think if it's difficult, you'd have to ask a viewer of the work, you know, how they feel about it. I am chuffed, as you said, that somebody should take something from the imagery and it should provoke a reaction. Whether it could be. Sorry, I've lost it. I think you're asking a question I'm still processing.
I'm aware that you've mentioned a few times about maybe you're being very narcissistic or self-indulgent. These are the words you've used. And yet I noticed that when the work has been exhibited, that people have talked about how they resonate with the imagery and that it's touched them very deeply. And I'm wondering how that leaves you feeling.
You know, and I've spent my whole life taking nice images of lots of nice people enjoying life in perfect lives, perfect homes, perfect families, and the world isn't like that. And I feel quite strongly that the work brings more of a sense of reality to some people's backgrounds, you know, and I'm not even going to go there as regards judgment on people's upbringing or even my own. But if it does touch somebody, then I'm really pleased, and it makes them more aware of how early experiences can affect your present, and indeed how that goes on to affect the next generation. So I know it sounds a little bit deep there, but I'm really pleased if people are touched by the pictures, because I don't feel that we've got enough pictures to cheer us up in the world. I think, you know, there's a sense of reality, and it's my reality, and it's my honesty and my courage, and if people accept that on my terms, then clearly that's what's important to me, I think.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us so personally and intimately about your process.
Thanks, Fiona.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks.